Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. My name is Ben Poulin, back in my comfortable host chair. My guest, someone I've only recently got to know thanks to my good friend Kurt Price. She was his coworker for a while and is now his caregiver. Been a longtime radio personality in Lloydminster for, I'm told, 10 years at least. She came out west from Ontario, and despite poor taste in hockey teams, she comes with a wealth of knowledge of how to keep your boyfriend from causing a scene. I'm very pleased to welcome someone completely interesting, Heather Klages.
Thank you very much. It's quite the intro.
Oh, thank you. And I didn't screw it up. We were just talking about how embarrassing it would be to screw up an intro that you have written out.
You did very well.
I have to do that. So
Yep.
Yeah. So now we go off script here. So there you go. Lloydminster. So it's actually been how many years in Lloydminster now?
I moved here in 2009, so I've been here for 12 years now.
Okay. And so as I've been told, from Ontario. What part of Ontario originally you're from?
I'm from a small farm, which I like to refer to as the Klages Ranch, and it's the closest city that it's near is Owen Sound, Ontario, but it's really kind of, just on a corner near this small town and not far from this small town. So
Were you doing radio in Ontario?
I did radio in Ontario. I worked actually in Owen Sound at kind
Okay.
of my hometown radio station. That was my first job. And then I spent almost a year in Barrie, Ontario.
Okay. And that's when you came out west.
Yes, after
Okay.
that, because I'd been at that station it was 9 months, like it wasn't quite a year. And it happened to be during a year that the economy was not great. So I got laid off from that station, and that led to my search for my next radio job.
So what goes through your head? That's okay. Let's go across the country. Was that ever something that was in the game plan at or ever considered, I guess?
Well, to be honest, and my parents will back me up on this, when I was growing up, I told them I was going to live in their house till I was about 40. And then I kind of thought, gee, will they move out then? Or what will I do then? You know what I mean? So I had never seriously entertained the idea. I'd maybe thought about it. It might have crossed my mind, but I'd never really seriously considered it until all of a sudden I had been in a job that I really enjoyed, and then I wasn't. And I thought, do I want to stay in radio? And if I do, well, where is that going to take me? So that's when I started to seriously consider moving away from home, basically.
Right. So you saw a job posting in Lloydminster, applied for it, and then it's okay.
Actually, a girl I worked with, she sent the job posting my way, and she was like, if you're interested in staying in radio, I actually worked at this station a few years ago, and I think that you might enjoy it out there, and I know you're qualified for the job, so you should take a look at this. And I did.
Did you coming across the country? How did you plan that? Was that something? Okay, we're going to hop a plane and with a couple possessions, or was this an adventure on its own?
It was an adventure on its own because I wanted to take, you want to bring certain things with you.
Yeah.
You want like your favorite book and your favorite CDs and things like that. So I had been driving an older Jeep Cherokee, but the heater didn't work, the air conditioning didn't work. Like, it had a few issues.
And what time of year is this that you're planning this cross country?
It was in May.
Okay.
So I thought, I think I should have, maybe a different vehicle for that drive out, because I did want to drive out so I could have all these comforts. So my dad and I went around and looked at a whole bunch of different vehicles, and eventually I settled on the one that A, I could afford,
Right.
and B, that I thought, well, I should be able to pack a good amount of stuff in
So
this.
that'd be like a bicycle with a wagon.
Basically, yeah.
We're talking radio salary. So
So I got a Yaris, and great on gas, that kind of thing. And I was like, I can fit a bunch of stuff in there. But the night before I left, I had a meltdown because I was like, I can't pack my skates. I only have one frying pan. How am I gonna survive? And both my parents were like, it's going to be okay. It'll be fine. And bless my father for repacking my car for me. Because when I actually got out here and started to unpack, I was like, hey, he put my skates in. Hey, I have a lawn chair. Like, there were all these things that I was like, I didn't think I could fit that in, but he did it.
So he might have been a little bit more calm, less preoccupied with the...
A little bit,
Okay.
yeah.
How long did it take to drive out?
I took 4 days. I
Okay.
don't think it would actually take you 4
No.
days if you really
Yeah.
wanted to get there. But I wanted to stop along the way because part of the thought in my head was like, well, what if I don't get the chance to make this drive again.
Right.
Like, I want to stop and see the Terry Fox Monument.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my former PDs, he was working in Brandon, Manitoba.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'll stop and see him. I'll say hi. So there were a few stops along the way that I did want to make. So I gave myself that 4 days to get there.
What would be like some of the more memorable things you encountered on that drive?
The drive through Ontario was very long. It took 2 days. But the first night, the motel I stayed in, I don't remember what it was, but there was a little breakfast nook in the morning. And I met two gentlemen who actually lived in the Lloydminster area.
Oh, wow.
They were going to Ontario it was either to pick up furniture or drop off furniture. And as I was leaving, they were in the parking lot too. And they said to me, so what's the name of the city you're going to? I was like, Lloydminster. They're like, yes, it's not Lloydminster. It's Lloydminster. So I was always kind of grateful that I met them. And I mean, what are the odds, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing about driving is once I saw the sign that said, welcome to Manitoba, I was kind of relieved that I'd left Ontario. So I started to cry and I was like, I'm going to make it. I'm out of Ontario. Not that Northern Ontario isn't beautiful, but when you drive it alone, it can seem quite long, a long drive.
And then you get to the prairies.
Yeah.
It's more the same thing. My impression anyway. I don't know. Is that what?
Actually, I didn't mind driving across the prairies, but it seemed like, once I hit Manitoba was gone like that. Why did Ontario take so long?
So when you're coming out to Lloydminster, like, I mean, there is a little bit of maybe culturally a little bit different the way we think, even politically and stuff like that. Was there a little bit of a learning curve and kind of getting used to, the way things are out here compared to Ontario, or being rural Ontario? Was it similar? What were some of the things that kind of stood out for you when you first got here?
Everybody drove a truck.
Right.
Not everybody, but that's how it felt, right?
Yeah.
So that was new. Also, the fact that why at my apartment building do I have a plug-in where I park my car? Because the part of Ontario I'm from, it doesn't get that cold.
Right.
So that to me was a bit of a mystery until winter came around. Then I knew. And also the other thing that struck me was how large the farms are. Because where I'm from in Ontario, you have a smaller farm because you don't need as much land to grow your food or maintain your cattle. But out here you do need more land. So it just struck me that, wow, it really is wide open, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. So the job itself in Lloydminster, with the radio station, you've encountered quite a cast of characters, to say the least.
That's one way of putting it.
What is, okay, let's go specific here. We can pick on him. Your first impression of a gentleman we know very well is Kurt Price. He's been on the show a couple times now. So, and obviously you guys have evolved into a relationship here too. But what's your first impression of this guy?
The first time I met him, he was wearing a Montreal Canadiens t-shirt that said Price on the back. And I was like, he put his own name on the back of a Montreal Canadiens t-shirt? I was like, what's going on here?
Typical Leafs fan. Sorry.
And then I was like, oh, Montreal Canadiens fan. Oh, how's this going to go? But I was always very grateful that he kind of took me under his wing and introduced me to people in the community and showed me like important places that I need to go and things like that. So
like the John Deere dealership.
That's right. So so I always felt very grateful that he kind of, took care of me, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Now, there's a story in that. I say the John Deere dealership, but wasn't that something that was kind of something you was important to you to see or something like that? What's the story behind that?
Yes. Well, my family's a John Deere family. So my older brother, he is a mechanic. And when he first got started, he apprenticed at the John Deere dealership, and that's how he worked his way up. So John Deere has been a big part of our family's life. And so that was kind of one of the things that Dad wanted to know about too, like what's the John Deere dealership like? And so my younger brother came out to visit, and we thought, hey, let's go to the John Deere dealership. We'll look at the combines. We'll look at the big tractors. So we're out there just wandering around the yard, just looking at everything. And this older gentleman comes up to us and, just starts talking to us and finds out we're from Ontario. Oh, well, why not come have a tour of the dealership? So took us around the yard, took us into the dealership to see the mechanics bays, took us everywhere. Really nice gentleman. And then I come back and, I tell Kurt about this, and he's like, do you remember his name? And I was like, well, if you said it, I'd remember it. Do you think it was Ken K? I was like, yeah, I think it was Ken K. Yeah, he's the guy who owns the dealership. But just how genuinely friendly he was, and he just really made you feel welcome.
Right.
Yeah, just like at home.
Now, I want to go with a little bit of a different direction here. When I did my very first podcast, that was at my house back in St. Paul, I interviewed Kurt. You were kind of looking at the equipment, and you made an interesting comment that kind of stuck out with me, and it was that you wish you had something like this when you were talking with your grandfather and collecting stories. And there's something really important there I think we should talk about, is that this was a guy that served Canada in World War II, and that you actually did get a lot of his stories and preserve those and stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about him and maybe some of the stories related to that?
There's so much I could say about my grandpa. Well, I know that I've been thinking about him a lot lately. I do, because he passed a few years ago, but it's funny how just little things will make me think of him. But I was thinking the other day, because somebody asked me who my hero was, and I was like, oh, it was my grandpa, obviously. But then I was like, but when I was a kid, I didn't really understand what it meant to be in the war. But I remember the first time he told me he got shot in the war. I was a kid, I was at home, I was sick. My mom and grandma, they had a trip planned, so they went and did their thing, and grandpa was like, oh, I'll look after her. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table eating some soup, and he tells me, did I ever tell you about that time in the war when I got shot? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, right? And he told me, he looked out the kitchen window, and he's like, the guy was sitting in a tree, just that tree, from here to us. That's how close he was. And I just felt a pain in my shoulder. And that is such a vivid memory for me, because I think that's the first time I was like, he was really in danger.
Yeah.
I don't think I understood that. Probably the first time I heard that he had been in the war.
I think that's I don't want to say misconception, but just kind of an unfortunate frame of mind we have. Well, the war is over and done with, and now you're home safe here now. But I don't think we actually really understand what. No,
and he took me to Holland for the anniversary of the 65th liberation of Holland, and for them, it's still very present, because the grandparents who lived through it, they told their kids, they told their grandkids. And we were in Amsterdam on a streetcar, and multiple people got up and offered their seat to my grandpa because they saw he was a veteran and he was Canadian. And you don't come across, you don't see that in Canada.
Isn't that interesting, though?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something definitely we need to learn more about. So yeah, it'd be.
And the other thing I really remember about that too is they have Liberation Day, which is a day off, and where they go to different cemeteries where soldiers are buried, and they decorate their graves. And there was a couple that came up to us and said, do you mind if we take a picture of our son with your grandpa? Did he fight in the war? And I said, oh yeah, he was in Holland. And so they took this picture, and they said, we're going to show this to our son through the years and say, because of this man, we are free, because he fought for us. And so for them to maintain that connection is really special.
Mm-hmm. That's a great story. What else were some of the things that your grandfather told you that kind of stand out?
He loved to tell the story about one Christmas. He and the group he was with, they were guarding the Nijmegen Bridge. And Christmas dinner arrived. And it was this beautiful spread, and they had beer, and it was the first beer he was going to have since he left Canada. And then their commander comes in and goes, you, and he pointed to my grandpa as one of them. They're trying to blow up the bridge. You need to get out there. So he had to leave Christmas dinner and go out there and guard the bridge. And they never did try to blow it up anyways.
Jeez.
But he was like, I was so close to Christmas dinner, but you're out there.
And and our biggest problems today is their free Wi-Fi. It's like we just don't get that impression of it. So I'm so glad that he shared so much with you, because I do know other friends of mine that had grandparents that served in the war. They didn't like to talk about it.
And you came across a lot of that, like even when we were in Holland. And it's interesting because Grandpa once said to me that there tends to be two schools. There's one school that doesn't want to talk about it at all. Then there's the other that can't seem to let it go, like they think about it too much.
Right.
So I always felt very fortunate that he was kind of down the middle. He'd talk to you about it, but there were certain things he didn't tell me, because he told me there's things I'm just not going to tell you.
Enough to make the point across and make us understand, but not enough to, I guess, put him through anything that's yeah. So no, thanks for sharing that. That's important that we know that. So it was really one of the stories I was really hoping you would share with that on that. So back to your radio days now. So in 12 years in Lloydminster, I seem to have a lot of people related to the radio industry for some reason. But I guess, when you work in there so long, there's a lot of interesting things like that. So what are some of your favorite stories from the world and from your career in radio?
Oh gosh. My first year out here, I did evenings and weekends, and that included opping for the chuck wagon races.
Right.
And being from Ontario, I was not familiar with chuck wagon races, but I was like, oh, this will be interesting. And so listening to it, I was like, this is, kind of fun. Like, I think I kind of like this. I should actually go see this in person. So that was a new experience that I probably never would have had if I had stayed in Ontario. But it's a sport that I really enjoy now, and I really respect a lot of people that are involved with it because of the amount of work that goes into it and the care of their horses and things like that. So listening to them for the first time and then actually seeing them in action for the first time, that's always been pretty neat. It's
kind of the same way. I was quite a bit older, like growing up in the area. I think I was working in radio out here, so I was in my late 20s the first time I saw chuck wagons live, and it's a pretty gritty sport.
Yes.
And tense too, right? And you really get an appreciation of how was it 4 wagons at once going around the barrel and then racing out and down around the track, and it can get pretty.
I should say that I was lucky enough to ride in a chuck wagon.
Oh.
Danny Ringette took me out on it was kind of like a thing for the media, right? Just to see what it was like. And I remember him saying, now once they go, just hold on. And I'm glad he told me that, because you do have to hold on. And then we were coming around a turn and he's like, look up, you're missing it, because all this dirt's flying everywhere, right? Jeez. But when you look up and you're like, wow, we are going. Like, I can see why they get so into the sport and they stay with it.
So you're still with the radio now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are your plans for the future of that? Are you going to stay with it, or what are you thinking career-wise? Because we've talked to people, Kurt and myself, we've kind of moved in different directions, but I mean, would have loved to stay with it, but if you have the opportunity, what are your plans?
It's interesting because when I got laid off from my job in Ontario and I got this new one, and I came out here with this thought of, try and experience new things, like take it as this could be like, a great experience that you've never tried before. So I kind of try and say never say never.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if an interesting opportunity comes up, I'm going to take a look at it. If I'm fortunate enough to continue on in radio, that's great. But for me, it really is about the people. Like, I've met some wonderful people that make me feel like I'm a part of their family and make me feel like this is home. So I feel like as long as you have those connections, then you're in a good place.
Right. Perfect. Heather Klages, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Always a pleasure, and someone completely interesting. You can find us through Facebook and social media by searching Poolin Radio. Find us on your favorite podcast provider by searching Poolin Radio or Someone Completely Interesting. My guest again, someone completely interesting, no doubt about it.